Hey guys, you got RFF here for another episode of Madden R School. We covered the planned agenda. Again, like I said in the first episode, I'm not sure if we'll get through all of them, but my plan is to at least get through the first few. We talked about improvement as a skill and mentality in the first episode. I did want to stress again that anything we cover today, anything we cover in future episodes, we're going to getting a lot more detail about passing and offensive play calling. Um, it's not going to matter if you just watch the video and then do nothing. And unless you have a freakish memory, you're not going to remember everything or kind of organize your thoughts in terms of how to implement what you want to work on into your game without some kind of plan or organization. So we covered some of that in the first episode. So again, I know it's kind of fluffy sounding, but I can't stress enough just how important that kind of deliberate practice, that kind of improvement as a skill is going to help you actually improve your game. All this stuff is knowledge, but none of the knowledge will matter if you don't know how to put it into action. So with that said, we are going to cover defensive play calling today. I don't think that this is necessarily the area that people struggle with the most, but the reason we're going to do this one next, I said in the first episode I want to kind of prioritize these in case I don't get through all of them. But the goal here is that this one's probably a quicker win than passing. I don't think there's quite as much. I don't want to say there's not as much depth. There's definitely a lot of depth involved, but you don't necessarily have to read the offense quite to the same degree as the offense has to read the defense. I don't believe to be at least have some success on defense and make life a lot harder for the offenses you're going to face. I feel like defensive play calling is a lot about down and distance and situational. It's a lot of pre-snap stuff. They come out, they show a certain personnel grouping, based on the number of wide receivers that they're showing, and based on down and distance and score, you can make some assumptions about what you want to stop and how they might play it. Whereas when you're on offense, when you're midfield, they can call any coverage. So you really have to make both pre and post snap reads. So I think offense is a lot harder when it comes to passing and making those reads. Obviously, interceptions are where a lot of games are lost in this league, but defense is where I think that we can make some major strides with a small amount of time and basically little to no stick skills. Before we dive in, I do want to focus on what my defensive philosophy is. It's not everyone's, but I think it works for the vast majority of teams. We do have a few players that are a lot more aggressive than what I'm going to cover today. And as you get better and better, then you can dial up that aggression. But again, if you're listening to this video, if you're not consistently winning 10 games, and even some of the guys that are consistently winning 9, 10, 11 games, they still struggle with being overly aggressive on defense, and they might lose an extra game or two per season because of that. But for the most part, if you're winning 10 plus games, you're probably okay there. If you know exactly what you're doing, you're probably okay. But again, these videos are designed for if you're struggling to win a few games, if you're struggling to get to 500, if you can approach 500 but you really aren't sniffing the playoffs, or if you're making the playoffs and you really want to know how to take that next step and become a Super Bowl contender. So my defensive philosophy boils down to basically three things. This is not rocket science. My number one goal is to force offenses into long drives. I don't want to give up the big play, and while that sounds obvious, nobody wants to give up a big play. It's shocking to me how many blitzes guys throw out there, especially super risky blitzes at times where there's just very little upside. So we'll get a little bit into risk reward later on in this video. But number one, force offenses into long drives. Number two, this is very directly related to number one, but the way I see guys play, it's they're afraid of third and short. And what I mean by that is part of the reason guys call blitzes so much. It's not just about the blitz. Sometimes it has to do with crowding the line of scrimmage, but they are so aggressive because when it works, it looks great. They go from you set an offense from 1st and 10, you get a 3 or 4 yard negative play, and suddenly it's 2nd and 13, 2nd and 14. It seems like their drive is over. But by doing that, especially when you get to some of the better players that aren't going to be quite as intimidated by you putting 9 guys in the box or by you blitzing all the time. They're going to know how to beat it. When they do beat it, it's a touchdown, or when they do beat it, it's 50 yards, and swings the field position and gives them at least a field goal and possibly a touchdown later on. So it's not that it never works, is that when it works, it seems amazing, but when it doesn't work, you give up gigantic plays. So by playing that way, you're basically saying, without realizing it, that you're afraid of allowing offenses to get into third and short. I said the number one thing was force offenses into long drives, because if they get third and short, third and medium over and over and over again, even if they're really good at it, all you have to do is win one of those, right? You don't have to win 1 out of 3, like you have to win like 1 out of 5. And so even if they're converting 80% of the time, which they won't, by the way, but even if they did, you still might stop them and force a field goal instead of a touchdown. So that's like the bend but don't break. And number 3, and I think that is still related to 1 and 2, it all has to do with forcing them into drives, is understand that risk versus reward, because obviously you don't want to have zero aggression. Anyone who's watched me play knows that I do blitz sometimes. You do want aggression, but you want it to be calculated aggression where the reward is higher than the risk. Okay. Also, before we dive in, I'm not going to do a ton of practice mode stuff, but I'm going to kind of show you what I mean at times. I think that the practice mode is going to be a lot more useful with the passing. But before we dive in as well, I want to cover coverage shells. So that way, when I'm talking about what works well on different downs and different distances and different parts of the field, you'll have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Now, probably every single person watching this video understands what cover 1, cover 2, 2-man, cover 3, cover 4, and cover 6 are. Those are the standard coverages we're going to cover. But what I don't know if everybody knows is kind of how to separate these into 2 very, very basic concepts, but they're really critically important to understand. Number 1, you have middle of the field closed, and number 2, you have middle of the field open. And all it really means is whether or not you have that center fielder, that free safety over the middle, shutting down all deep mid routes. So middle of the field closed, you've got your cover 1, your cover 3, your cover 6. 6 can vary sometimes, actually. 6 is probably, depending on the play in Madden, can be open or closed. But in terms of what's middle of the field open, your cover 2 man, your 2-man, your cover 2 zone, cover 4, and sometimes cover 6 in Madden is middle of the field open as well. We'll cover why that's important here in a moment, but you need to consider both of those things because it drastically changes what your weak point on your defense is going to be. So for play calling, I said that at the outset of this that this is going to be a quicker win, I think, on defense for a lot of guys than learning the passing game a little bit better. When I see guys play, I think I've said it before, said it many times in chat. A lot of it, but not all of it, does come down to blitzing and understanding when you can blitz and when is not a good time to blitz. Again, there are good players that blitz on first down, on second down. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying if you're watching this video, you probably shouldn't be doing it. I see guys cover 0 blitzing on first down. It's crazy to me. So one of the reasons that you don't want to do that on first down is because even though it might seem like it's a good run-stopping formation, something like a 0 blitz actually is very bad at stopping the run. All you have to do is kind of catch one guy out of his run fit up the middle, and it's a touchdown. If you go on the outside, there's even a greater chance that it's a touchdown. A lot of big runs that guys break off are versus these aggressive blitzes. There's a saying in the NFL, which is that players feel like they have to earn the right to blitz, meaning you have to get them to third down to blitz. Now, obviously, that's not a hard and fast rule that always applies. Certainly, you can throw in blitzes on second down. Maybe once in a blue moon, depending on the field position, you might want to throw in one on first down. But that should be the exception, not the rule, and I see that happen a lot of the times when guys are playing in the league, and I'd say I see that a lot more often from guys that don't win much. First down is a good time to be boring. First down, you want to stick to your vanilla base formations that can stop the run, but also prevent the deep ball, because again, we want to force them into long drives. We want to force them to convert third downs. I think that even really good players in this league have trouble converting third downs on a regular basis. A lot of the best offenses in the league are scoring a lot of points because they are able to break away big plays. So you take away the big plays and force them to third down, and you can stop even really good offenses, like Super Bowl contending offenses. Sometimes you can stop them from scoring more than 20, 24 points. Okay, so again, base formations that can stop the run, but also prevent the deep ball. So this is cover 1 and cover 3 were basically born for this, right? We talked about middle of the field close versus middle of the field open. Something like cover 1 or cover 3, you've got that 8th man in the box. You're going to be set up well to stop the run. But at the same time, you've got that deep safety. If you have a quality deep safety, sometimes you can even do a decent job against verticals on the outside. You want to know your personnel, and we're not going to talk a lot about personnel today, but are your corners fast enough to get downfield in off coverage against a vertical? If they can't do that, you probably shouldn't be running much cover 1, if at all. And they don't have to be as fast as the wide receiver. As long as your corners, while in off coverage, can sort of keep up stride for stride versus a vertical, which is most corners can do that, even in Madden, then you're probably safe versus most vanilla offensive play calls in cover 1. Cover 3, sort of same thing. You have that deep coverage, but at the same time, you got the 8th man in the box to stop the run. I threw cover 4 in here as well as a zone that's really good at stopping the run. I think most people started to come around in terms of what cover 4 really is the last Madden, but the last couple Maddens, the dev team has turned cover 4 gradually into what it is in the NFL, which is a quarters coverage. It's match coverage. It's not this like prevent defense where you have everybody dropping into these super deep zones and sitting there, which is what cover 4 had kind of been in the past. And so a lot of Madden players kind of had the impression that cover 4 was prevent or something like that, and therefore running a lot of cover 4 was cheesy. It's not. Cover 4 is like a base defense in the NFL. There are NFL teams that run cover 4 or quarters, as it's known, as their number 1 called defense. Again, it's match coverage. We're not going to go in a whole lot of detail about what the coverages are today. I think most people understand most of them. But cover 4 should be seen as almost like a man coverage when you run it. The reason it's middle of field open is because, again, like your safeties are likely going to be matching up with a route, so you don't have that free safety just in center field waiting to double team on any deep route. These are all good plays to run on first down. The reason why cover 4 is good on first down is because it has 9 players in a run fit. So there's 9 guys that are reading run at the snap. Okay, cover 1 and cover 3, you have that 8th guy in the box. Cover 4, you technically have 7 in the box, but you have 2 more that are right outside it reading run. So it's really good versus outside runs. So again, the purpose of first down is not to get them into 2nd and 13. That's a nice bonus if you can, but the purpose of first down is to respect the run, make sure that you don't just give it to them to where they're in 2nd and 5 all the time, but also prevent the deep ball. Okay, not a lot of guys in this league right now. We'll see if that changes over time, but not a lot of guys in this league on first down are looking to pass the ball to get 4 to 5 yards. Most people are looking to either run the ball or get a first down, and you can use that to your advantage. If you're facing a team that has absolutely no run threat, then sure, you can run like a cover 2, or a 2-man type deep coverage. And we do have very good defenses that base their defense in a cover 2. It's certainly very strong if done right. I think it's a little bit tougher to do, and I'm not as good at it, so I'm not going to cover that as much. But if you feel like you know exactly what you're doing, fine, go for it. But I think for the most part, people watching this video, you want to stick to that cover 1, cover 3, that 8, 9 guys in the box on first down. Second down, on short, medium yardage, let's say anything under about 6 yards. Obviously, you have to respect the run, but you really want to watch the deep pass here. This is where guys love to go deep. They love to be aggressive. So likewise, you can actually afford to probably get a little bit more aggressive since you're already basically behind schedule. If they have like a 2nd and 3 or 2nd and 4, you're already behind schedule. They already had a good play on first down. They only have to get 4-ish yards in 2 plays. So they're probably going to either take a shot or they can go make a throw 15 yards downfield, something like that. So this is actually a time where I do like to mix in a blitz, even though it might seem counterintuitive, because it's second and short to medium. This is not a bad time to throw a blitz. We talked about risk reward. The reward here is you throw them into third and long, right? The risk is minimal because you're already behind. Like you're risking, what if they get a first down? Well, I mean, they're already set up to get a first down pretty well if they already have second and favorable. So again, that's where you really need to think about that risk reward of when to throw in a blitz. Obviously, you can't do it every time, but that's a situation where I will throw in a blitz if I feel like I can get home. When it's second and long, this is where I feel like guys go the opposite route. Second and long is where I see a lot of blitzing. And sure, you can blitz on second and long. That is generally a passing down. But good players oftentimes will catch that and get 6 to 8 yards, no problem, against a blitz. Or maybe they even run the ball again and break off a big run. So you could do a lot of things on second and long. I mean, most of the coverages are all viable. But for me, when it's like second and 7 or second and 8 or second and 9, I want to force the offense to check down. I want them to be, even if it means get there in third and 2 or third and 3. This is what I mean about don't be afraid of third and short. Yes, it's better if they're in third and 6 or third and 10. Obviously, that's better. But don't play second down as if you can't afford to let them get the third down. So second and long is a situation where I will come out in that vanilla kind of defense. A cover 1, cover 3. I don't love like a 2-man defense on second and long because where is cover 2-man vulnerable? It's a middle of the field open, right? So it's vulnerable deep down the middle, and it's actually vulnerable short in the middle as well. Guys have press coverage, so sometimes they'll be able to stick to their guy like glue, but for the most part, it's not going to be great at stopping those quick hit, intermediate, short passes. But a lot of other defenses are good to call on second and long. Just know that you shouldn't be an automatic blitzer just because it's second and long. Because again, if you get them into a whole bunch of third and 3s, a whole bunch of third and 2s, a whole bunch of third and 4s, it's very likely that they are going to fail on one of them in a single drive. And finally, obviously, third down, the most critical down. If they're short, if they're like third and 1 to third and 3, this is where you do want to be really aggressive. Aggressive doesn't mean blitzing all the time, but you always want hard flats, right? Like there's literally no downside to that. Like if they beat you over the top and they catch you in a hard flat and they unleash like a 15-yard pass into that sweet spot, good on them. That you just need to be okay with losing that way. But you cannot lose to a dump off on third and 3. This is where you actually want to force your opponent to be more aggressive. Why? Because guys don't want to do it. When it's third and 2, they either want to run the ball, or third and 3, they want to run the ball, or they want to do a quick high percentage pass, right? Like nobody wants to throw it 40 yards on third and 2. So you want to be. So this is where something like a cover 2 can be really good on third and short. As counterintuitive as it sounds, sometimes even 3-down linemen can be pretty good. Now, I don't advocate 3-down linemen in like a nickel or dime formation unless they have a lot of wide receivers on the field. But what I mean by 3-down linemen is like a 3-4, where yes, you have 3-down linemen, but 4 guys are in zones, which means they're in run fit. Maybe you have that 8th guy in the box, and so really it's more of a run thing. It's not great versus the pass, but again, third and short, they're probably going to be looking for a quick pass. So rushing a lot of guys, you don't have that same reward. You want to be rushing more guys when they have to pass deeper. When they are passing shorter, you don't want to be rushing a whole bunch of guys. You just want to make sure you can stop that run before it gets to that 2 or 3 yard mark, and then you want to stop everything short. We're not going to talk a whole lot about usering, but using is where you can sort of take away some of that intermediate midfield stuff if you match a route. But again, this is where you want to be in that cover 2, cover 3, even potentially cover 4 on third and short. Anything that's going to take away the short routes. This is where I really don't like. You don't want to be in something like cover 2 man on third and short, right? Why? Because a single slant, there's like no one in the middle to stop it. It's bad against the run. Don't be in cover 2 man on third and short. Cover 6 is another bad one because why, you have like two deep safeties and it's mediocre run fits. Cover 2 is not great versus the run inside, but admittedly a lot of guys in the league do like to run outside, and so cover 2 zone is actually not bad against outside runs because those corners are in hard flats, right? And they are actually in a run fit. So cover 2 zone is not bad on third and short because it's going to take away a lot. Short passing better than any other coverage, and it's not bad versus an outside run. Medium, all bets are off on third and medium. Most guys in the league are probably going to throw it deeper than they have to, but not everybody. Medium is where you can throw out a standard zone, a standard coverage, or you can blitz. I don't really have a whole lot of intelligent things to say about third and medium, other than we'll protect the sticks, and I'm going to kind of talk about that more specifically in a couple of minutes. Third and long. So the number one thing that I see here, I think there's a couple things. Number one, I hate being in a middle of the field open coverage on third and long. It's burned me so many times, and I see streams where people get burned so many times. So again, as a refresher, middle of the field open, you got your cover 2 man, you got your cover 2 zone, your cover 4, and your cover 6. Now there are plays in cover 2 zone that you can make work because what happens is people turn that mid read into a deep blue. So you're really just running cover 3. So even though you might call cover 2, if you're converting somebody into that extra deep blue, you've just now called cover 3, just with maybe better outside coverage. So I'm not including that as a cover 2 because it's not really cover 2 at that point. A cover 2 man, I realize it can work. The longer you get, the better it is. Like if it's like third and 9, cover 2 man can be pretty good. But just know that cover 2 man, unless you have 3 down linemen and you're using someone in the middle, you're going to be vulnerable to that like 6 to 7 to even 8 yard slant or quick route over the middle. So in that, if it's like third and 6 or 7, that cover 2 man is a questionable call. It can be good when it's longer. The only problem with doing that with using the middle and rushing 3 is man coverage. I don't care what kind of man coverage it is, needs pressure to force a quick throw. And if you're running cover 2 man and rushing 3, you better hope you have like monsters or get really lucky. I really don't like rushing 3 with man coverage behind it. I just think it's a bad choice almost all the time, and I would not recommend it for anybody watching this video trying to improve. Again, there might be some niche scenarios where a really good player knows exactly what they're doing and rushes 3 and users, I've seen someone might user, maybe the guy that was covering the halfback, something like that, and throwing out an extra flat route. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. I just mean if you're looking for a quick way to get better, I would always rush 4 if you have man coverage, just as a general rule. It's not just the obvious part that 4 rushers get home more, but like the better your pass rushers are, the more you should rush 4, not 3. Because if you have a couple of elite pass rushers and you rush 3 against 5, let's just say they only block their offensive linemen and no extra blockers. Well, 3v5, that means 2 and possibly your 2 best pass rushers are double teamed. So even if they're an elite pass rusher, you're kind of wasted that advantage because they're being double teamed. If you're rushing 4, even though all you've done is add 1 pass rusher, only one of your pass rushers can be double teamed. So you've gone from 1, like if you're, again, to rephrase, if you're rushing 3, only 1 guy has one-on-one coverage, or excuse me, one-on-one against a lineman. If you're rushing 4, you've got 3 guys. So you've actually tripled the amount of one-on-one pass rushers. If you have really good pass rushers, you can kind of see why that matters so much. So I don't think a lot of people stop to consider the difference between rushing 3 and rushing 4. And I've made this what I consider to be a mistake, is if you have really great pass rushers, like, well, I can rush 3 sometimes. You can sprinkle it in, but the better your pass rushers, the more you want to get them in that one-on-one scenario. I want to talk a little bit about protect the sticks when it comes to third and medium and third and long. There's a risk reward here. I don't think there's an obvious play, and I think it depends a little bit on the flow of the game and who you're playing and what their passing style is. I used to do protect the sticks basically on every third down, and I think on some of the third and longer plays, it's absolutely still worth doing all the time. But you get this like limbo zone between like 5 and 8 or even 9 yards where it's really a risk reward. Like for instance, let's say you're in cover 3 and you protect the sticks. Well, yes, your guys are going to stop anything short because they're going to stop at the line of scrimmage, let's say 7 or 8 yards back. But for something like cover 3, how do you beat cover 3? Well, one of the ways is like a deeper intermediate route, something like 12, 15 yards down the field in front of the safeties but behind the linebackers. So the less depth those linebackers get, the more those routes are going to be open, which on a third and medium to a third and long is the exact kind of route that an offense is going to be looking for. So again, third and long to third and medium, just sort of be wary of protect the sticks, that it will stop your guys from dropping deep. So there's not like a hard and fast rule. You need to use your judgment on, are they going to get deep enough to stop some of the intermediate deeper routes versus the trade-off of an underneath route getting to the line of scrimmage where they're dropping deeper in the line of scrimmage, which can be pretty frustrating for obvious reasons. Hopefully that made sense. Situational play calling. So I'm just going to pick something random here. Some kind of cover 1. Okay. So situational play calling on this one. This is another thing that I see people doing a pretty poor job of. We're going to start when the opposing offense is backed way up, so they're inside their own 10-yard line. This is where I see a lot of guys calling cover 0 blitzes. Okay, I can't think of a worse time to call a cover 0 blitz. Yes, you will once in a blue moon get a safety, or once in a blue moon, or not even once in a blue moon, more often than that, you might get a negative gain, or maybe they're here and you sack them back to here. And that looks really great because now they're backed up and maybe they have to punt from their end zone and you get the ball with good field position and you're like, oh, hell yeah, that blitz really worked well. But let's piece that apart for a moment. Let's say they're on the 8-yard line and you 0 blitz them and you get a sack on the 1 and you don't get the safety and they punt. Well, you could have you could have forced a stop anyway and maybe you lost like 10 yards. Like if you get a 3 and out, you're probably getting the ball between the 40 and 50 anyway instead of the 50. I mean, it's not a huge difference. You already have them backed up. Your job here is to get a stop, a 3 and out. Your job's not necessarily that you have to take them from the 8 to the 1. Meanwhile, another reason I think the reward for this is really minimal compared to what it seems like, perhaps, is the odds of them scoring a touchdown if they start on the 8. If you were to break this down like into statistics, I don't know what the number is. I'm sure something like Football Outsiders or PFF has statistics on this. And I bet ours is actually fairly close to the NFL on our sliders anyway. It's really, really low. Like there's a chance they might get a field goal. But again, if you're doing your job and you're forcing them into a lot of third downs, think of how many third downs they have to get into between here and the opposing end zone. Most of the time when they score from here, it's because of a big play. Well, what does something like a 0 blitz or a super aggressive blitz give up? A big play. So you're basically exposing one of the only ways that they're going to score a touchdown, and your benefit is you stop them for a few extra yards instead of just getting a normal stop like right here. So that's like maybe 10 to 15 yard difference. So it's not that there's 0 benefit. Yeah, when you get the sack, it's nice. It looks nice. But you're ignoring all the times you give up these gigantic plays that are like you should never give up a 95-yard play. You should go an entire cycle without giving a 95-yard play up. For real. So just the risk reward is terrible on that one. And I call it quicksand kind of or fool's gold, because if you do this a lot, you will occasionally get a safety. You will occasionally take them from the 8 to back down to the 1 or 2, and it will hype you up and you're going to go, yeah, that was a great play call. But you ignore the times that you give up like a 90-yard touchdown or a 50-yard play. Maybe they don't quite score the touchdown, but suddenly it flips the field. So make them put together drives. When it's like something like their side of the field, between their own 20 and 40, that sort of thing. So again, the odds of them scoring a touchdown here are certainly higher, of course, but it's still fairly low, right? They're still on their side of the field. They're not even to midfield yet. You should treat this like if you get them into a lot of third downs, they are not going to score, or at most they might squeak into field goal range. and you should call your plays accordingly. Um, the closer they get to your end zone, the more aggressive you can be, right? So it's kind of, that's where we come back to risk reward. The risk, if things go wrong between the 20 and 40, it's just a lesser version of what we just covered when they're inside their own 10. The risk is really high. If you screw up and you give a big play, they've turned a drive where they are unlikely to score into a touchdown in one play. That's a huge risk. And the reward, if you stop them, right? Let's say the reward, you sack them back for 8 yards, and now they're here and they have to punt. Well, that is a reward, and that's nice, but they already were unlikely to score. Now, if you get that same sack, and I don't want to skip forward too much, but if you get that same sack, when they're on their 2, or on your 2, excuse me, and sack them back to the 10, well, now that's a huge fucking reward, right? Like here, they're probably scoring a touchdown. Here, especially if it's like third down, they're probably not scoring a touchdown. So that is an example of a time where an aggressive blitz, the reward is gigantic. The reward for like a blitz landing when they're between their 20 and 40 is just not as high as it seems like. Like, yes, you get the stop, but there's other ways to get a stop besides sacking them for -8 yards. There's other ways to get the stop than zero blitzing them and hoping for a -3 yard rush and hoping that they don't bust out a 40-yard pass. Midfield. This is where it can get a little hairy. So when I say midfield, really what I'm talking about is as they get closer to field goal range. This is where the math starts to change a little bit, right? So if they are 1st and 10 on the 40, right here, or 1st and 10 on the 50, their odds of getting into field goal range at this point are pretty high, right? Like there's a pretty decent chance they're going to get a first down, and that first down, there's a decent chance they're going to get them into field goal range. Once they hit about the 35, maybe 34, they're in field goal range. So here, you should kind of plan accordingly. You can maybe dial up the aggression a little bit more on certain downs, because if you can get a stop here instead of here, right, that's worth 3 points. You don't want to get so aggressive that you give up the touchdown, because the odds of them scoring a touchdown when they're in this 40 to 50 yard range, it's not terrible, but it's still not great, right? Like you still have the advantage, so to speak, on defense when they're here. That advantage is slowly, you're losing it play by play, but you still have an advantage, so you don't want to just give up a touchdown. But you can afford to be a little bit more aggressive. One thing that I like to do occasionally, and I'll only do it like once a game typically, is if the offense gets to like, here, right? So they're still kind of near midfield, but they're now squeaked into field goal range. This is a great time to dial up a blitz that they're not expecting. And this all goes together, right? Because if you blitz all the time, including times where it really doesn't make sense right here, you're not actually really confusing them if you do it all the time. So they're just ready for your blitzes. So then when you really want a blitz to land, it might occasionally land. But like I know if I play a guy that's super blitz heavy, I'm always looking out for it, or at least I'm usually looking out for it. I'm probably not good enough to always look out for it, but I'm always trying to be prepared for it. And so I'm going to pick it up a lot more likely because I know it might come, and so I'm going to stay in field goal range. Whereas when I play, I don't call a lot of blitzes. So when I throw out a zero blitz, it might be the third quarter, and I haven't done it a single time all game. And maybe they're on the 31-yard line, and it's, I don't know, third down, or maybe it's even second down. And maybe it's a tight game where I really don't want them to kick this field goal, because I won't do it if it's not a tight game, right? You got to pick your spots. And I sack them for 8 to 10 yards. Well, now they're here. Now they're out of field goal range. That was a really high reward on that blitz, and the risk was not negligible. I mean, like let's say they get a big play and end up here. All right, well they were already in field goal range. Now they're still in field goal range. They're more likely to score a touchdown. That would be a bummer. That's the risk, but the risk reward is just a little bit better balanced than if you're just blitzing all the time wherever. Opposing 20, and then inside their own 5. Those are the kind of last two areas. So opposing 20, there's a reasonable likelihood that they're scoring a touchdown at this point, right? I don't know what the numbers are for all this, but obviously the odds that they will score a touchdown is much higher. However, there's still, I bet, like a 50-50 chance they don't. Think of how hard the red zone can be when you're on offense. Well, it's just as hard for them when they're on offense. So 50% chance to score a touchdown would be my guess. I don't know if that's totally right, but that would be my estimate. So don't do anything. Don't get like desperate. You can be aggressive, But just know, knocking them back from this is where I would actually dial down the aggressive. I was just talking about how you can be a little bit more aggressive when they're barely in field goal range because you can knock them out. Well, this is almost the opposite. Like, they're safely in field goal range. Even if you get a sack for -8 yards, all right, well, they kick a field goal here. Whereas if you give up, a 10-yard play, well, that might be a touchdown. So here's where you don't really want to be. So you don't want to be reckless with your aggression in this range, right? Because there's still a very good chance that you can stop them. Maybe they've converted on 4 or 5 third downs because you've done a good job and you've done your deliberate practice and you're being sound in your play calling, and they've had to convert 4 or 5 third downs just to get to this point, right? Well, what are the odds that they keep doing that over and over again? Maybe, but you keep putting them in third downs, and maybe they don't convert that touchdown. So you don't want to be so reckless that you just give up the touchdown, because there's still probably about a 50% chance here that they don't score. Inside 5, this is where you can afford to be super aggressive, of course. Right? I touched on it earlier. If they're on the 1 or 2 yard line, you can't do it every single play, because they know a blitz is coming every play. They're just going to score on you. But this is a great series. Like, one of these 3 plays, you should dial up a blitz. I see it all the time. Throwing inside the red zone is really compact. Even our interception-happy league is a little bit reticent to just force the ball, because they understand that it can be a pick six, or you don't want to throw an interception when you're on the 2 yard line. So as a result, they hang on to that ball just that extra half second. A blitz here can be fantastic. I'm not saying it has to be a zero blitz, but I will do it here from time to time. I'd say probably 80% of the zero blitzes I call are inside this 5 yard line area. Because again, you get that sack, they're back here. If it's 2nd and goal on the 11, the odds are they're not scoring a touchdown. If it's 3rd and goal on the 11, odds are really low that they're going to score a touchdown. So that reward for a single sack on a blitz is fantastic. Or if you can force that interception, that's amazing too, right? You're taking points off the board, and especially if it's like a check down that gets picked that might even be going the other way, which is at a monumental 10 to 14 point swing. So this is where blitzing and being aggressive can be very valuable. Now you have to be careful, because they can obviously run the ball. So you got to be careful about which blitz call you dial up. But you do have an extra guy or two to play with, so to speak, because you don't need those deep blue zones, right? You can call like a typical cover 1 or something. Well, you have that extra blitzer to send, because you really don't need that free safety over the middle. What's he really covering? So this is a great time to be aggressive. Another thing to cover, let's do this for a second. I'm just going to pick something basic. Just some very basic things about adjusting pre-snap based on what you're seeing. Let's just do like a cover 1 and just do some random 3 wide receiver formations. Switch out of this. We get a little bit of room. Okay. I don't have any. I don't think I have any. Yeah, I do actually. Okay, cool. So in terms of what I'm looking for when it comes to calling an audible, I don't call a ton of audibles on defense. Some guys do, and some guys do it to great effect. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. But again, this series is really about helping guys that are really struggling win more games. So I'm going to talk about what I know. So there's a couple things that I'm looking for when I'm going to audible out of a certain coverage, especially audibling out of man coverage. I like man. I ran man probably in the top 5 to 6 of anybody in the league. I don't think I was the most man heavy, but I was pretty high up the charts depending on the opponent and what they wanted to do. This is like a great set for man, right? It's spread out. The only real immediate vulnerability is that this running back could split out to the right, and this linebacker's a little bit out of position, but not majorly. This is like the quintessential balanced formation, good versus man. It's a little bit of spread, which can make it a little bit tricky, but this free safety is in really good position to cover deep routes for 2 to 3 guys, and probably is able to get wide enough on certain throws to even help with some of these outside throws to Fuller or Hopkins here, right? So this is the time where you don't have to worry about audibling. You can do whatever you would normally do, shading, things like that. When it comes to shading, I guess a little side note on that one. I do think in general most play calls do a pretty good job. Like they'll have a combo of shades, like to technically speaking, cover one, oftentimes you want to be an outside shade because you're funneling things toward the free safety. But it's not always that simple. A lot of the times I will shade inside. Okay. Why? Because even though you are not funneling things toward the free safety, you want to shade inside for these outside receivers. Basically you're using the sideline as an extra man. So these outside corners are better off shaded inside. Now, if they had a tight end here, or pretend this is like a tight end or the equivalent, this is more dubious about whether inside shade is good. So there are times where I don't do this a whole lot, but I might want to shade that guy outside. Why? Because if he runs a post, he's running directly into read, right? He's already lined up on the inside. He's running directly at this guy. But you don't want him going outside too much because read probably is going to have a hard time getting there. So it's about kind of knowing like where your weaknesses are. So like this guy could go either way, but we could shade him outside as well. The base play call, if I kind of reset the play, will actually sometimes have a combination of that inside outside. So I think you generally don't have to worry too much about shading. If you know guys are really post heavy, maybe you shade inside. If you just know that they're just not going to hit these like deep corner routes, that's the main danger from shading inside, is these slot receivers going on like a corner, beating their man, and a well-placed lob can get it over their heads. It's not an easy throw to execute, so oftentimes I will force an offense to show me that they can make those throws. Obviously, the throws that you're going to see a lot more often are like a deep post or a slant or a drag, and shading inside will do a better job against a lot of those things, at least for cover one. And even in a new Madden, unless something is really bugged and completely borked, everything I'm talking about now should translate to new fresher Maddens. So let's let this play run and see if we can get a defense that does not do well, or excuse me, get an offensive formation. All right, so this is actually again pretty good. Occasionally, sometimes what I might do is again, this is a little bit Madden specific. I don't want to talk too much about Madden-y stuff because it could change title to title, but just in case this doesn't, drag routes, there's no reason why cover one should be so bad against drag routes. Yes, drags are kind of a man beater, but they shouldn't be it by like 5 yards. So sometimes I'll bring this extra guy up just to be a little bit more glued to that tight end on that drag route. If he's way out here, that tight end will sometimes get open by like 5 or 8 yards, which is a little crazy. You don't want to put him like right over it unless it's like third down, because you do want to respect the run. Notice the run fit here. For those of you who don't know, I'm holding down right trigger and pressing X and B. So X, it's intuitive, right? This is like the run fits if the run goes to the left, and then you hit the right button, B. And this is the run fit if the run were to come to the right. Now, obviously, it's shotgun, but pretend it is not shotgun for a moment. The symbols mean the red. You notice how the red doesn't change, right? Like they're just rushing that gap no matter what. In this particular case, the oranges aren't changing either, but sometimes they do. Those are specific run fits. Oftentimes you will see that the linebacker have different fit responsibilities depending on which direction the run goes. And then notice on my guy, that kind of brownish, that means edge. All right, he's got edge responsibility. So in this particular case, I may not be too worried about a counter from a shotgun, and maybe I'll put him over here. But if this was like single back, you do want to respect the run, especially if it's first or second down. But I'll move him. Other than that, this is similarly a pretty good formation that man can generally handle. See if we get one that I want to cover. So yeah, this is kind of a little funky. Align man used to be better than it is now. So again, I usually don't move a ton of guys around, but I will at times just make sure guys are at least lined up more or less over their man, so I don't get burned by a very basic route needlessly. All right. Nope, still they're giving us a lot of balanced formations, so we're just gonna let these run. Here we go. All right. So man coverage, there's two big things that I want to cover that it's worth audibling, and I thought it would be good to show why. So for something like this, this is where it's important to have some solid audibles. You can kind of see mine. This is a custom defensive playbook. I have usually a man, some kind of a vanilla cover 3 type. Sometimes, and then I have some kind of it varies depending on the formation, but some kind of a cover 4. Sometimes it's a cover 2 in my LB, and then I have something on RB that we'll cover here in a moment when we get this right one. So what I would do here is immediately audible to cover 3 sky, or if I have some other type of audible, but I'm audibling away from man basically. This is a little bit Madden-y, and so my hope is that maybe this improves a little bit for Madden 20, but it's not entirely Madden-y. I mean, these compressed formations do give real NFL defenses problems. Now, the reason they give defenses problems in real life has more to do with like pick routes and things like that, which we don't see in Madden. But nonetheless, there's kind of a wonky translation. But man really doesn't do well against these compact formations, in my opinion. And I think that's the general consensus. Again, there might be one or two. There might be guys out there that can do a good job with it, but it's just so many routes beat these compact formations. Not only are the crossing routes devastating, but they can get outside. It's just goofy. So what I would be doing in that situation is immediately audibling to cover 3 and shading outside or something like that versus that compact formation. I want to get one other play just so I can illustrate here. Really just not giving me much. Tell you what, I'll just call it myself. All right, so again, let's say it's a typical, second down or something, and they show 3 wide receivers, okay, and then they come out in something like this. Trips, right? Maybe it's 3 wide receivers to a side, and most often it's going to be something like this, where it's a tight end plus 2 receivers to one side. So man is okay versus this. I really don't have a big problem with man, so it's less about I should have actually picked a different play than man. So pretend I'm in like a cover 3 or something like that. I don't have a problem with something like this, running cover 1 against it. But if I was in a zone, like pretend I'm in cover 3 sky, that's a little bit funky. Let me do a color from scratch so we can get like a normal look there. Cover 3 sky, and we are calling it versus, again, like a trips formation. All right, here we go. So this is not the worst thing in the world, right? It's not like you're exposed for some huge 60-yard bomb here. But at the same time, it's not great either. But you might do something like this. I did like a linebacker shift. But even then, there's only so much you can do. We have basically 1, 2, 3 guys, right, covering 3 receivers with a guy deep. So it's reasonably safe, but it's not like the best coverage considering they are overloading this side of the field. And this is one of the ways you beat zone coverage, right, is you load up a side of the field. So usually what I have is some kind of audible per play, or excuse me, per formation that deals better with trips. I said man was not a bad one, so in this case, maybe it's cover 1. Cover 9 can be a good one. So now let's look at what's happening here. So now notice that we basically have, I said before it was kind of 3-on-3 with a guy just sort of generally in center field. Well, now this guy's not generally in center field anymore, right? Now you got 3-on-3, but they're all 3 short routes, and this guy's covering this side of the field as well. I don't know how I don't really love this guy creeping up. I know why he did it. This is actually in quarters. Match coverage on the other side of the field, so if this were me, I'd probably be using this guy. I think cover 9 was working well in Madden. Again, I'm just going to assume coverages are generally working in Madden 20, and if something is broken, we'll cover that. But in football terms, I would like this look a lot better than a cover 3. Cover 9, cover 6, these are just variants of the same idea, is that The defense is now basically rolling their coverage in cover 9, cover 6 type coverages toward one side of the field. It's a little bit confusing. We have quarters to the left, and we have basically a cover 2 look to the right. All right, we got our flat, we got our 2 short zones, and we got our deep half. So where's this vulnerable? Well, this is absolutely a middle of the field open formation, right? There's literally no safety sitting in the deep center, and so it's middle of the field open. So that is our vulnerable point. Vulnerable point. Excuse me, I can't speak English at this time of the night. So that's why I'm covering, or excuse me, using this guy. His normal responsibilities. Let me go back here. His normal responsibilities in quarters coverage would be to guard any deep routes by the number 2 wide receiver. Well, to this side, there is no number 2 wide receiver. That halfback would then become that number 2 wide receiver, or the number 2 option, right? So again, this is a match coverage. I said quarters was match. So basically, this guy is going to be manning up on Hopkins if he goes deep. If he goes short, this guy is going to take him short. So if Hopkins goes deep, and he's the only route on this side deep, which is almost a certainty, it's not impossible that Miller could go deep, but it's pretty unlikely. Reed's responsibility, the guy that I have, is just to double up Hopkins or go find work. And since we've already established that this is the weak point, right? This is middle of the field open. So that's why I'm going to use this weak side defender and just make sure that no, there's 2 things that can really beat us on that right side. Number 1, a vertical by Griffin, right? Because this guy's dropping back into a deep half. Deep halves really suck in Madden at the moment. Hopefully they'll get better. But even if they do get better, his responsibility is to get wide to cover any verticals from Fuller. So this is, yes, it sucks even worse than it should, but a vertical by Griffin would be dangerous in real life. That would be a way to beat this coverage in real life, unless this guy gets over a little bit. And again, just to kind of keep underlining the point, he can afford to do that because his normal responsibility is just doubling Hopkins. So I would sort of just cheat this way a little bit after the snap, just make sure a vertical by Griffin doesn't beat us. Another way that we can get beat is like maybe a deep post by Kiki Kuti there out of the slot. Possibly a post by Fuller could be dangerous, but unlikely. Theoretically, this guy should just crush any post, whether he would or not is a different story. But a post by Kuti could also be dangerous. So Reed can get over if I user him. He won't do this naturally. All right, so everyone went short. Oh, nope, see, there you go. That was a stop and go route. So see how I was in position to take him. And let's just sort of analyze as a way to wrap up this session, what happened there. So see how Hopkins, start on the left, see how Hopkins goes deep. Again, quarters, match coverage. That guy takes him deep. We're set there, no problem. I said at the beginning of the episode, make sure you have corners that if they're starting an off coverage, can go one-on-one with a wide receiver as long as they're reasonably well matched. Even if they're like -3 or -4 speed, they can usually do that. On the right side, we had 1 deep route. Our half was in position to take him. The 2 short routes. I mean, that was pretty much, or excuse me, the 1 short route. I thought it was about to be 2. Pretty much had that locked up. No big deal. And then that stop and go route, I had the weak side safety covering him. So this would have been like a tough throw for a human to make. This would have been a really tough throw. And we get the sack, and I don't know if we get the sack. Maybe he tries to force it. I think that at best, that's like a 5-yard completion, and most likely, I don't know when he throws, he might not have run to the left like this idiot CPU did, but at best, he waits a little bit longer and gets a 5-yard completion. Most likely it's an incomplete, possibly even a sack. So circling back, I just want to do like a side note on covering up your weaknesses with your user, but the key point I wanted to say is have something in your audibles, or at least if you don't run a custom playbook, that's fine. Be ready to audible to something better than what you have against trips, whether it's man. Cover 4 can be okay. Cover 4 can actually be okay versus trips, but it can be risky in Madden, so I would avoid it. I mean, cover 3 is not the worst of vanilla, but if you're trying to take your game to the next level, you're trying to go one step above vanilla. So again, adjustments versus compact formations. adjustments versus 3 wide receivers to a side. Finally, and we're not going to get a whole lot into personnel today. We'll do that in a later episode. But I mentioned that I am running a custom playbook. Just a couple notes when you're building out a playbook, since we do allow defensive custom playbooks in our league at the moment, not offensive for a variety of reasons. In my opinion, the most important thing about a defensive playbook is all the stuff you take out. That's more important in my mind than all the things you could potentially add in. I've seen guys with defensive playbooks with like every formation under the sun, and I do have a good number of formations in here, as you can kind of see. I have 7 nickels. That's probably about 2 more than I needed. I ended up running this one, 3-3. Excuse me. I ended up running 3-3-5, wide 9, 2-4-5. Some 3-3-5 wide, maybe the occasional double A gap. There's really a couple formations here that I barely used at all. 4-4 I threw in. I occasionally used quarter. I didn't use it much this cycle. I really only use these 3-4s. No, I used bear in some situations. So I used all 3-3-4s. Used dollar for some third and long. Big nickel, used quite a bit. Both of these dimes. Again, I could have had 5 dimes in here, but really, what was I doing in a different dime formation that I couldn't do in these two? Sometimes the answer might be something, but for me, everything I needed was covered in these 2 formations. And even within these formations, as a bad example, a good example would be this one. I had like 6 plays in this. I took out all kinds of stuff. Why? Because I had a a personnel package that was really, really heavily run stuffy. So I had, something like Clowney would be lining up as an offensive linebacker the way he would in a 3-4. So I didn't want Clowney in manning up against anybody. You'll notice that I took every play out of the formation where the outside linebackers were manned up. The one-man play in this entire formation, look at that. You got a spy and you got a pass rusher. So even though it's man, I didn't have like my outside linebackers who were 3-4 outside linebackers really had no business manning up against anybody or even really dropping too much into coverage, because I saw this as a run stuffing formation against 3 wide receivers with run stuffing personnel. The goal was not pass rush, so only 3 down linemen. That's where I had pretty much any play out of the playbook that was a blitz, pretty much any play out of this formation that didn't align with what I was going to use it for. And we'll get more in a later episode, and like I said, in terms of matching personnel, in terms of what plays you're calling. But again, to reiterate, what you take out is going to be much more important than what you add in. You don't need every formation. Like I said, I probably had too many formations, and nickel, everything else is pretty good. So it's better to start slim and then add things in as you'll know when you're like, hey, I really wish I had a formation that did this, or I really wish I had a formation where I could get this guy on the field or these couple guys on the field. So we'll save some of that personnel matching to formations for the later episode, but we covered a little bit about removing plays. Just remove blitzes where you have run stuffers, right? Like if let me find another formation. This one I use for a variety of things, so I really kind of go back to this one. I removed blitzes because I was using this not really too much on pass downs. I loaded it up with big run stuffers, and so I didn't really want blitzers. Even that 3 double buzz, yes, the outside linebacker is quote-unquote blitzing, but it's not considered a blitz in Madden or in real life if it's just 4 pass rushers. That's just switching up which guy's the pass rusher. Vice versa, something like dime, I often would have a couple of run stuffers in the middle there. I don't have a whole lot of blitzes. I have a couple. Don't have a whole lot of blitzes in this formation, whereas I might have had a few more blitzes in this formation with like more pass rushing personnel. So take out the plays in a particular formation that you don't want to call given the personnel you're going to have on the field. I guess my final parting note on this one, since we're hitting the hour mark, and that's how long I said I would go, is 3 versus 4 pass rushers. We covered it some early on. It depends heavily on the play. On third and long, I did run 3 pass rusher, 3 down linemen some of the time for something like a cover 2 drop. It really depended on the opponent. There were opponents that were really good at deep passing and at making smart deep pass reads and at being patient. So if if you have this on the field and they understand to take their time and they have the offensive line and the patience and the skill to know when they can take their time, they will crush you if you try to do this. This type of play is really good, but it's really good against guys that you think you're going to load up all these zones, you're going to have a random, short zone / QB spy there. Eventually, 3 pass rushers will get home, eventually, just like the NFL. But they're going to have a lot of time. But if they're going to make a panic decision, or if they're not going to realize how much time they have, okay, cool, then a play like this is pretty good. But just know who your opponent is and know what they're trying to do. If they are a guy that just is really good at attacking deep, I've been burned pretty bad at times by running 3 pass rushers on every 3rd and long. They'll sit in the pocket all day and they'll convert it deep because like this coverage right here is not going to cover everything forever. This mid-read guy, if you have a deep vertical or post, he's going to end up back here. Well, suddenly you've got this whole middle of the field here is going to be open. Like there's just, if a guy has time and you give him time, just be careful. That said, that can be a very effective strategies to use 3 down linemen versus some guys, versus a lot of guys even, but just be aware. I usually rushed 4, again, because I had 3 very good, really, really good pass rushers for most of the cycle. And like I talked about earlier, I wanted to get those pass rushers in one-on-one matchups as often as possible. If you don't have very good pass rushers, then you probably want to consider either blitzing more, blitzing that 5th guy, or as weird as it sounds, sometimes going 3 down linemen if you don't have very good pass rushers can actually work out, because the thought process is they will eventually get home, but in the meantime, your opponent is going to throw it prematurely. He's not going to realize how much time he has, and he throws it into some of these really zone-heavy, max coverage type plays where you're making up for the fact that you don't have a pass rush with the fact that you've got 8 guys sitting in a variety of coverages. So both strategies are effective. Depends on your personnel, and it depends on what you think that offense is capable of doing. I'm always thinking of what is this player and what is this offense good at, and try to the absolute best of my ability to take that away. I'm going to do my best later in the series to cover game planning. That's more like Defense 301. I don't have that much to say on it, but there's some stuff that you can do, but I'm not going to cover it today. So hopefully this was helpful. Let me know. Shoot me a DM if you feel like this was something that was helpful, or if you feel like I didn't cover something when it comes to play calling or defensive play calling philosophy that you either struggle with or you thought I would cover and you'd like me to. I'm happy to expound on that, or even make like a little 4 or 5 minute follow-up video that I post later on. So, all right. Good luck to everyone watching this. I hope your defense is a little bit better in Madden 20 than it was in Madden 19. I hate seeing 50 to 48 scores. We don't see it very often in our league. I'm proud of that. So I want everyone listening to this video to not be on the receiving end of a 50 burger this cycle. All right? Thank you.